It was a blustery day on the island of Sodor. The engines could feel the weight of their trains as the wind blew fiercely against their wagons. Thomas the tank engine had been chosen to collect a new sailing boat that had arrived for the mayor of Sodor because the engines on the Little Western were busy. The boat was painted in blue, red and white colours. Gordon and James, however, weren't very impressed. "Sailing on the sea doesn't look as splendid as running on rails," snorted James. "Rails are better than sailing any day," added Gordon. "Besides, boats can't go anywhere without their masts up. The engines don't need some silly old mast." But Thomas took no notice. He was quite impressed with the boat. "With those sails," he said, "it could help us go fast along the rails when it's not in the sea." Snorted James. "You'll need the wind for that." "And it's not exactly a jet engine, is it?" added Gordon, remembering how Thomas had once raced past him hauling a jet engine which had accidentally been switched on. Cranky soon lowered the boat onto Thomas's flatbed.
"Be careful," he warned. "The boat is heavy and it's a rather blustery day."
"It won't be too heavy for me," boasted Thomas. "Try losing a dome while speeding along," Gordon muttered to himself. "I'll just lower the mast," said the boat engineer. "We won't get through tunnels and underneath trees with them standing upright." "No need to worry about that," said Thomas. "We'll just take the route through Misty Valley. There aren't any tunnels along that track and hardly any trees to bother the mast. Besides, it's the quickest way to the coast." "Very well then, Thomas," agreed his driver reluctantly. Once dock workers had secured the boat safely onto the flatbed, Thomas set off on his journey. He trundled happily along with the wind blowing against him towards Misty Valley. But Thomas had forgotten about the steep hill and puffed his hardest with the heavy load. "I can do it! I can do it!" he chuffed. And he could. "Hurrah!" Thomas cheered and trundled happily along. Along the way, he met Emily. "Where are you going with that boat?" Emily asked. "I'm taking it to the coast for the mayor," Thomas said proudly. "I see," murmured Emily. "But why didn't you take the mast down before coming along this route?" "Because this route has no tunnels and hardly any trees to get in the way," Thomas said, and headed back on his journey. As he crossed the crossing, Elizabeth the lorry called out, "Be careful with that boat," she said. "It's a rather blustery day." Thomas was going so fast that he couldn't hear her. Unfortunately, the signalman had left the point switched to an old forest line, and Thomas had accidentally trundled across them. Then there was trouble. The boat's tall mast got caught in the trees. "What's going on?" Thomas cried. His driver looked up and sighed. "The tall mast is caught in that tree above us," he said. "The signalman must have left the point switch to this old forest line, because I know this isn't the route to the coast." Thomas did feel embarrassed. "Surely we can go back along this track," he said.
"I'm sure you're right there, Thomas,"
agreed the fireman. "But I can't lower the mast while it's caught in that tree," the boat engineer said. "With this wind it could be accidentally torn down. And besides, I can't really climb trees." "I'm sure I could pull us free," said Thomas. The driver and boat engineer reluctantly agreed, but going backwards and forwards at first didn't help. Thomas, however, was determined, and within a few minutes they had broken free. Unfortunately, the ropes holding the sails had come loose. Neither Thomas's crew nor the boat engineer noticed. The wind grew stronger as Thomas trundled along. It felt as if it was pulling him. "Yippee!" cheered Thomas as he began to go faster and faster. The driver tried to apply the brakes to slow them down, but Thomas couldn't stop. "Oh boy!" As he rounded a curve, he passed Molly. Be careful, Thomas, Wally tooted. The wind is blowing the sails. But Thomas couldn't think he was going much too fast. At last, Thomas approached the harbour village, where the mayor, the Fat Controller, and his wife, Lady Hat, were waiting. They could see Thomas racing towards them. "Slow down, Thomas!" the Fat Controller called out. But Thomas just raced past.
Come back here, my boat,
boomed the mayor. At last, the wind began to die down, and Thomas managed to stop safely. Phew! Thomas panted.
If the wind picks up again, we'll never stop at the harbour,
groaned the fireman. "Don't worry, I'll just tie the sail and lower the mast," said the boat engineer. "That'll solve the problem." And it did. The boat engineer rolled the sails and tied them tightly. Then he lowered the mast. Once the job was done and the boat engineer had climbed back on board, Thomas headed slowly back to the harbour village. Everyone was still waiting when Thomas came back, but they couldn't be cross for long. "Well, that's the first boat of sail and rails I've ever seen," chuckled Lady Hat.
"Yeah, there's no dents or scratches to my boat either,"
added the mayor. "I'm sorry I'm late, sir," said Thomas sadly. "And I am sorry I sped past so fast earlier." But the Fat Controller just smiled. "What matters is that you arrived with the boat safely, Thomas," he said. Thomas beamed happily. The boat was soon launched into the sea safely, and when the sails were hoisted up, Thomas thought it looked splendid. "Sailing along the rails was fun while it lasted," he said to himself, "but full steam ahead will always be better than full sail any day."